Mrs. Harris, members of the faculty, my beautiful young queens. I bring you greetings from the Black Awareness Movement, sometimes known as the Black is Beautiful movement. And I want you to understand that anything that you may hear me say is not for the purpose of disliking or feeling negative toward any group, but it's all for the purpose of building within us the feeling of our identity, the feeling and knowledge that Black is beautiful. It does not mean that any other group is not beautiful. It only means that we are becoming aware that Black is beautiful. And to that end, we have established in the city of Philadelphia and in other cities what are known as Black Learning Centers, where young people go and learn about our heritage. You know, other groups read in the textbooks the background of their mothers and fathers before they came to America. And those that perhaps don't have all of the information in the textbooks that you read out of, they can go home and ask their mothers and fathers about their heroes and their legends and their traditions from the old country. Because of historical circumstance, our fathers and mothers were denied the knowledge of our heritage. And of course, it was stripped away for a reason. And that reason is that it was very profitable to have us work for 246 years without a payday. It's very profitable. And so that we would be denied the knowledge of who we are, this was taken out of the history books several centuries ago. And of course, it has not been put back as yet. But my young queens, I want to tell you that truth crushed to earth will rise again. You can't hide truth forever. Truth may seem that it's forever on the scaffold, and wrong seems forever on the throne. But that scaffold sways the future, and behind the dim unknown stands God amidst the shadows, keeping watch above his own. It will come out. There's no point in hating anybody, because to the extent that you tear down another, you tear down yourself. We have to understand that you can't build humanity, you can't build a beautiful society by tearing down anyone else. Black is beautiful. You are beautiful. And I want to tell you what men throughout the ages have said about our mothers and fathers. And of course, this whole society had to make us feel that we were ugly. It had to make us feel that we were worthless in order to control us as they made us work and build America. But Herodotus, the father of Western history, said over 2,500 years ago when he visited our homeland, our fatherland, and when he came back to Greece, he was so awestricken, so astonished, so carried away by what he saw when he visited Nubia and other countries which are in our beautiful continent, and said, the people are so beautiful, the women are so beautiful, the men are so wise, their homes are so beautiful, their athletic prowess, their knowledge is so wonderful that truly the very gods must make their homes among the Africans. And later on, from the part of Africa from which 95% of us come, the western part of Africa, historians that traveled in that area during the 14th and the 15th and the 16th centuries and visited our universities and went back to Europe and went back to Northern Africa and went over to Asia Minor and told them what a great university we had in Timbuktu and what a great university we had in the city of Janet with 1,400 professors. That's who you are. You're the descendants of those people. And then the scholars from Europe and the scholars from North Africa and the scholars from Asia Minor came down into this place across the Sahara in an area larger than all of Europe called Shanghai. I know it sounds strange to your ears. Shanghai. We are the children of the kidnapped people of the Shanghai Empire. All of the historians at the time wrote the glowing reports of who we are. And they all wrote back and came back and told how the scientific translations of all the science that had been gathered up at that time was there resting in the University of Sankore in Timbuktu. And they also wrote back and came back and told of the Shanghai beauties. And you young queens this morning are the reproductions of our mothers, who men from all over the world came to view your beauty. Of course, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. We see with our brains. The eye only lets in the light to be registered on the brain. And of course, if we have been taught that black is wrong and that we are closer to an animal, that we are high-class pets, naturally this registers on our minds and we see ourselves as if in a distorted mirror. A mirror that is very much like in the amusement park. When you look at yourself in the mirror, you're seeing yourself through a distorted lens because we have been brainwashed into believing black is wrong. And we have to get rid of those words which are negative in black. You know what a synonym is. A synonym is a word that has a meaning very much like another word. But there are 124 synonyms for black and 123 are negative. And that is why we have this revulsion, this feeling. We have to get rid of those feelings. We have to address ourselves to a new thing, that black is beautiful. And there are two areas which I want to stress this morning. And I know it might sound a little painful to hear them, but all new birth requires pain. And one of them is that we have a grand and a glorious past. And that in order to stop this knowledge from coming down to you, they had to snatch the babies away from the men and the women who stood on that auction block and raise the children who are our grandparents on a distant plantation so that they would never know who we are. Oh, many a time I stood before the auction block that is preserved in New Orleans. I was teaching at Dillard University one summer, and I used to go down and stand before that auction block, a large platform, its surface worn smooth by the tramp of the thousands of feet of our parents. And I wept when I stood before that auction block, and I wept for this reason. I wept not for the agony that they suffered, but I wept for you, who didn't know who those people were, who our mothers and fathers were, who stood on that auction block. There were professors from universities on that auction block. There were mathematicians on that auction block, because in immutable granite, carved there, is a story of the evolution of algebra, evolved by a black man named Ahmes, the father of algebra. It's there carved in granite so that all the world would know it in the ages to come. And yes, on that auction block there were men of great literary stature who spoke 6 and 7 languages and taught it in the schools in the Songhai Empire, the University of Wallata. Yes, we came from a grand past, and on that auction block there were great musicians, because from Africa not only were the percussion instruments invented, but the violin, the harp, the flute, the zither, the bagpipes. So I knew that on that auction block there were great musicians. We just didn't come by accident to have a Leontine Price or Marian Anderson or Charlie Parker. It came down through the genetic stream, came down through the generations in the bloodstream. That's who we are. You are the Songhai beauties. But one thing that happened in our empire, they all remarked about it, was the amount of respect that they had for each other and for all people. And you know, we sing that song, R-E-S-P-E-C-T. That just didn't happen either. Respect. See, we have been taught to disdain each other, but our fathers and mothers didn't. They had respect. They were, in truth, kings and queens. Reminds me of the story of the young eagle. Perhaps you've heard it. There was once a farmer who had a barnyard of leghorn chickens, white leghorn chickens. And one day a friend of his said, you know, you could make some extra money if you would capture an eagle and show him around and charge admission to see him. And so the farmer said, that's a good idea. And he went out and he captured an eagle. But the eagle was too used to freedom, and would not be tamed. And he would not hold still, and he fought back. And then his friend said, look, maybe we made a little mistake. Why not use the eggs, the 2 eggs that this female eagle has laid? And so the farmer said, that's good. And he put the 2 eggs under a setting hen, and in due time, one of the eggs hatched. And this young eagle came out. He didn't know who he was. So the farmer called him Tom. And he put Tom out with the chickens, and he ran around with the chickens, and he thought he was a chicken, never knowing that he was the king of the birds. And he ran around with the chicken. In due time, he became a little ashamed of his color. See, the other chickens were white, and his feathers were deep bronze. So he put some chicken wool on his feathers, kind of lightened them up a bit. And then he noticed that the feathers on his head stood up while the chicken's feathers laid down, and he was a little ashamed of that, so he tied a silk rag around his head. You know what I'm talking about, don't you? Well, in due time, the other egg hatched. Now, when this other egg hatched, he broke bad when he came on set. farmer called him Turk. Now somehow Turk felt that he didn't belong down there running away from the farm every time he stamped his foot. And one morning very early he wandered over to the edge of the barnyard, young Turk did, and he looked up into the sky, and there he saw a speck appear. And the speck got closer and closer and closer, and it got to be the largest bird he had ever seen. Of course, you and I know that it was a full-grown eagle. And the eagle came to rest on a branch right above the barnyard and looked down at young Turk and said, "What are you doing down there with those chickens?" And young Turk said, why, I am a chicken. He said, "No, you're not a chicken. You're an eagle." He said, "An eagle? What's an eagle?" He said, "An eagle is the king of the skies." He said, "I want you to spread your wings and flap them and come up here beside me, and I want to rap to you a while." So young Turk said, "I can't fly that high. You know chickens can't fly that high." And he said, "Why, you can fly that high? There's nothing that you can do because it's in your blood and in your bones. Spread your wings." He spread his wings, I flapped them, and he flapped them, and he rose higher and higher, higher than he'd ever risen before, and he came in on the branch with the old eagle. The eagle says, "Now settle down here." He said, "I want to tell you that your father was a king of the skies. No bird could fly higher nor farther than he could without rest. And your mother was a queen of the skies. She was looked up to and admired by all of the birds of the sky. That's who you are." He said, "Well, you know, I'm a little ashamed of the color of my feathers." He said, "Don't you know what that color represents?" He said, "Well, that's royalty. Represents royalty." He said, "Oh, that makes me feel so good," Turk said. He said, "But how about the way the feathers on my head stands up? It's different from the other birds down there, the other chicken." So he said, "Why, don't you know that's your crown? I said that you were a king." He said, "This sounds so good." He said, "Let's tell Uncle Tom." So he said, "Uncle Tom," he called him Uncle Tom in deference to his older years. You know, he was a little older. "Uncle Tom," and Uncle Tom was busy running around there with his silk rag on his head and so on. And he said, "Uncle Tom, this fellow's telling us who we are. He's giving us our history." So Uncle Tom said, "I don't want to hear anything about our history. I'm too busy eating this good food down here. And besides, you better come down here. You'll get us all in trouble." He said, "I don't want to hear any history." So the old eagle said, "Just forget him. He's too brainwashed. Let us fly away to our destiny." And they took off. And as they flew along, they came to a deep valley, and the old eagle said, "This is the valley of oppression." And the young eagle said, "We'll fall into the valley of oppression." And the old eagle said, "You won't fall because you have the strength of kings in your wings. You will not fall." And they flew safely over the valley of oppression. And pretty soon they came to a desert. It was the desert of mediocrity, the desert of don't care, the desert of only a C average. And the old eagle said, "Come on, let's fly." And the young eagle said, "I don't see any trees in sight. We won't have any place on which to alight. We'll fall." He said, "You won't fall. You'll fly over the desert of mediocrity, because you have the strength of kings in your wings." And pretty soon they came to a high mountain. It was the mountain of injustice. The young eagle said, "We'll crash into the mountain." He said, "You won't crash. You will fly safely over this mountain of injustice because you have the strength of kings in your wings." And I say to you this morning, you have the strength of queens in your wings. There is no mountain over which you can't fly. There is no subject which you can conquer. There is no height to which you can climb, because it has come down through the ages of who you are.